Hello and welcome to TOCOL TOROW. My name's Jeff, I'm glad you're here. Let's just jump right in. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to use the TOROW and TOCOL functions in your workbooks. First we'll get warmed up, then we'll use these functions to actually do an unpivot. And if you're not sure what that means, it means taking data that looks like this and converting it into more of a flat format like this. And if you've been using Excel for any period of time, you know this format is a lot easier to use with things like pivot tables. So let's head straight to Excel, exercise 1. First, let's get warmed up. Here I have some data. This has category in rows and months in columns. Now let's take a look at these values. Let's say we want to get these into a single column. Let's use the TOCOL function for that. Equals TOCOL. Where's the array? It's right here. That's just the range of numbers. Close function and enter. And now let's take a look at this. We've taken this range and we've converted them into a single column of values. By default, you can see it goes left to right and then down. So it does 100, 110, 120, and then it goes to the next row. 200, 210, 220, and then the next row, 300, 310, 320. What if we want to go down the column first and then move to subsequent columns? No worries. Let's go and edit our formula. I'm going to add a comma. That's going to take us to the next argument, ignore, which is optional. And depending on what you're working on, you want to check these out. For example, we can ignore blanks or errors or both, and then comma, and then scan by column. Now the default is false. That means it's scanning by row, which is what we just saw. It went left to right and then down. Let's change this to true, scan by column. This should look at the entire first column and then go to the right, to the next column, and enter. And now what we can see is it goes down first, 100, 200, 300, and then to the right, 110, 210, 310, 120, 220, 320. Now, as you can imagine, there's a reciprocal argument called TOROW, and that just creates a single row. So let's cruise over here, and let's go equals TOROW, and then let's grab all of this, close function, and enter. And as you can see, we have now a single row. It also has the ignore argument. It also has scan by column. So by default, it's going across and then down. Let's have it go down and then across. I'm going to change this argument to true and enter. And now it goes down 100, 200, 300, and then across. 110, 210, 310, 120, 220, 320. Perfect. Now that we're warmed up, let's head to the next exercise, exercise 2. Here we have similar data. We have categories in rows and months in columns, and we have these values. Let's say we want to kind of flatten it out, where we want to have a month column and an amount column. Let's start by grabbing the amount. Equals TOCOL, and we want to get all this stuff. Close function and enter. Okay, that was easy. Now let's try to get the month labels. Equals TOCOL. Let's grab all this stuff, close function, and enter. As we can see, we need to actually repeat these labels and fill them down. Currently, it's only giving us those labels once. So let's cruise over here and get a little area to work. Let me show you this little trick. Equals if. What I basically want to say is if this, comma. And what this is saying is point to these cell values. And if these cell values are true, then what do we want to do? Well, we want to do this. We want to repeat these labels. Close function. And before I hit enter, let's review. Jeff, what do you mean if C7 to E9 are true? What does that even mean? None of these are true. Well, to Excel's calc engine, 0 is the equivalent of false, and any non-zero number is the equivalent of true. So all of these look like true to Excel's calc engine. So now let's enter. And as you can see, that simple trick enabled Excel to repeat these labels. So what if we were to take this and put it into a column with our TOCOL function? Well, I think we might have something there. So let me delete this and let's try again. Equals TOCOL. And now let's put in our if function. If these are true, so any non-zero number is true, then I want the labels. Close the if function, close the TOCOL function, and enter. And now let's see if we got it. Jan, Feb, Mar, 100, 110, 120. 100, 110, 120, looks good. And then Jan, Feb, Mar, 2, 210, 220. 2, 210, 220. And 3, 310, 320, and we got it. But Jeff, time out. What if one of these was 0, like this? Enter. Well, now that breaks things. So if we want to build this so it doesn't like break if there's a 0 value, what we can do is just update our if function. So what we would say is if C7 to E9 is not equal to, and we're going to use 2 double quotes. And that's the same thing as empty. And we're going to go ahead and hit enter. And now we can see that doesn't break, but this time it actually returns the column label, January. And let's put this back to 100, and we're good. Now here we have month and amount, but to really unpivot this data, we also need a category column. So let's do that in the next exercise, exercise 3. All right, so first let's start with the category. And we're going to use the same trick, equals TOCOL IF. We're going to say if there are values here, so if those are true, comma, use the category. Close the if function, close the TOCOL function, and enter. And we got it. Same thing for month. TOCOL if. If these are true, meaning if these are values, then use these labels. Close function, close TOCOL function, and enter. And got it. And finally, the amount is super easy. It's just TOCOL of all of this stuff, close function, and enter. And let's just review. We have rent for 1, 110, 120. Rent for 1, 110, 120. And that should go Jan, Feb, Mar, Jan, Feb, Mar. That looks good. Utilities are 2, 210, 220. Utilities, those look good. And phone is 3. Phone is 3. Okay, that looks perfect. So this is really the unpivot of this. And oftentimes in Excel, data in this format is just easier to work with. And if you've been working with pivot tables, you can realize we typically start with data like this and pivot it into this type of summary. In fact, we can use the PIVOTBY function to create a little pivot table here. Equals PIVOTBY. Okay, the row fields are here, comma, the column fields are here, comma, the values are here, comma, and the function is sum. Close function and enter. And now we have a little pivot table-like report that was created by the PIVOTBY function. And you'll notice the PIVOTBY function provides a total row and a total column, and also gives us the grand total, which is pretty cool. So here we basically did an unpivot with the TOCOL function, and we did a pivot with the PIVOTBY function. So depending on what you're working on, I hope these functions will be helpful. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a great day. Hey Excel user, if you ever need to create summary reports, check out my Pivot Table for Beginners video. It starts at the beginning and shows how to store the data transactions in a table and then how to summarize those transactions with a pivot table report. I hope it helps unlock the incredible power of pivot tables.
This video is a production of Excel University.